Hey guys, Jocelyn from Fantasia Elegance here with another jewelry tutorial for you. In this video I'm going to be showing you how to make a wire wrapped setting for a cabochon or very flat bead. As you can see here, it just uses simple wire wrapping to make a cage of sorts to encase your cabochon so that you can turn it into a pendant, or if you wanted to use a smaller one you could also use this technique to make a charm to add on to a variety of pieces. So let's jump right in and see what sorts of tools and materials you'll need. Obviously you're going to need a cabochon or bead of some type. I forget what type of stone this is I'm using. I'm sure someone out there will recognize it. But as you can see, it is a cabochon. It's got a flat back on it. And this one I will be using is just under 1.5 inches long, just under 1.25 inches wide. For those using metric, that's about 3.7 centimeters long. It doesn't really matter what size you use. The only thing to consider is that if you use larger or smaller, you might need different diameters of wire to make it look good. With this size of stone, I will be using 18 gauge round dead soft wire. I do get all my wires from Rio Grande. People always ask me about that. And in addition to your 18 gauge, you're also going to want some smaller 24 gauge, again still round, dead soft. You can also use square wire for the larger wire. That looks very pretty as well. You can see an example of that here on this piece. Just a slightly different look to it. And if you're using a smaller stone, let me compare the size here for you. You want to go to 20 gauge, which is what I used on this one here. As far as tools go, you're going to use your very standard set of round nose pliers, chain nose pliers, flush cutters. You're also going to want some masking tape or painter's tape and a ruler. So let's dive right on in. So the first thing we want to do is get the circumference around your stone that you're going to be using, and that's where our handy dandy masking tape comes in. I'm just going to pull some of this off. We're going to pick a point along the stone. I'm going to start wrapping this around here. And this is just, I find, an easy way to quickly get the circumference. When you reach the other side where the tape overlaps, you're going to make a mark with a little pen. My pen will, there we go, cooperate for me. Again, that's just where they overlap. Going to unwind that again real quick. And then we can measure that out to get the length. Mine is just about 4.25 inches. And what you want to do with this is go ahead and add 4 inches to your measurement, because we want 2 extra inches on each side after completely encircling this stone with your wire. So I'm going to do about 8.25 inches. Oh, and for those who are using the metric system, adding 4 inches will be about 10 centimeters. So add 4 inches or 10 centimeters to your stone circumference after you have that. And then we're going to go ahead and cut 3 pieces of wire that length. So I'm going to cut 3 pieces that are 8.25 inches long. So after you've cut 3 pieces of your 18 gauge wire that are each 4 inches longer than the circumference of your stone, you're going to pull out your smaller gauge wire. I'm using 24 gauge again. And we're going to cut 3 pieces of this that are each, this one doesn't really matter as much. I'm going to go with about 2.75 inches long, which is going to be just about 7 centimeters. Again, this doesn't have to be exact, but I am going to cut 3 pieces of this 24 gauge wire. So you need 3 of those. All right. And then I'm going to go ahead and pre-bend these into U-shapes for wrapping using my chain nose pliers, and you will see the just gripping in the middle, making a nice tight little bend there just like that, just to have these ready on standby. Then we're going to pull out our 3 long pieces again. You want to make sure you have these all nicely lined up, and they're all stacked on top of each other just like that. So now we're going to take roughly the middle of these. So just eyeballing it, dividing it in half. You can measure to get exactly in the middle if you want. I'm going to take one of our little pieces, drop that right over it. Again, right in the middle. And then we're going to bind those together. And I apologize if there's some background noise today. They are doing some construction right outside, so I'm hoping that won't translate over into the video. We shall see. How many times you wrap this around kind of depends on the size of your stone. If you have a much larger stone, thicker wires, I tend to wrap it more times just to make sure it is more secure. So I'm going to go for about 5 or 6 times around here. You want to pick a side that's going to be towards the stone and trim off the wires so they're both on that same side. And I'm trimming those off on the same side so that we can hide them against the stone. And just snugging down those ends nicely. Just like that. I'm going to inspect, make sure these are still even. If they aren't, that's alright. You can fix them up a little bit. And I'm checking that is still in the middle of the wires. You can kind of scooch it around if it isn't. So there's our first bend. And this is going to go just centered at the bottom of the stone, just like so. Now at this point you can, if you want, measure or guesstimate or whatever you want to figure out where to put the bindings that will be on the sides of the stone. I like to just do that step later and actually wrap these around the shape of the stone and then attach the bindings later. It's up to you. Try it both ways, see which works well for you. So at this point I'm just going to start wrapping these around the stone. And depending on how thick your stone is, you might be able to just push them around like I'm doing here, or you may need to do a little bit more freehand work on it. And what I mean by freehand is just ditch the stone and start bending things. And then every few steps you can go compare it, make sure that it is still looking like it matches the shape. Like so. And if your wire is too hard and stiff to bend with your fingers, you can use your chain nose pliers. Just be careful with that. You don't want to be putting too many nicks into the wire. Some people have recommended coating your pliers in painter's tape or something like that to help alleviate leaving nicks in your wire. When you get to the top of the stone, we're not going to intersect these. I'm just going to cross them over like that. Once you're happy with how these are encasing your stone, again we just have those wires kind of crossing over each other at top. Don't worry about those for now. We're then going to add in our side bindings just like this bottom one, and you want them to be midline with the stone here. So I'm going to attach one right about there. And you don't have to use a round stone, an oval stone. You could use a round stone, even irregular shaped works perfectly well with this. And also of note, you could turn on its side and actually start with this being the bottom binding and put your bail or whatever up top here like that, doing a horizontal, whatever floats your boat. So at this point I'm going to pull out another one of those little bindings we made earlier. I'm just going to drop it on there at the desired location, and we're going to attach that just like we did the other one. Okay, and just like before, we're going to trim the ends so they're on the inside. And I'm going to snug that down there just like that. You do want to make sure you do the same number of wraps around with all of these bindings around the ring. Otherwise it will not look balanced. There we go. So then go ahead and do on the other side exactly the same thing. Alright, so now we have got our 3 bindings in place. We need to do something with the top inner sections here. So what I'm going to do is actually bend these wires all straight up at a 90-degree angle, and I'm going to make sure that these 2 sets, the 3 pairs on each side, are just touching each other but not crossing at all. So to do that, I'm going to not throw things on the table. I'm going to pull out my chain nose pliers. We're going to find the point where it intersects, right? And I'm just going on the back 3 right here, just at the point where it intersects, and I'm going to just bend these all straight up. And you also want to double check that everything is centered. I feel like mine is a little bit off center to the left, so I'm going to fix that. Alright, now it looks a whole lot better. So next thing we're going to do is do a 4th binding, and we're going to go around all 6 of these wires at the top. So to do that, we're going to pull out our 24 gauge wire. You do want a slightly longer piece for this than the other bindings that we did. I'm going to go with one that's about 4 inches or about 10 centimeters. Same thing as before, we're going to put a little bend in this guy right in the middle. Going to get everything lined up here. Dropping him over all those wires. And we're just going to cross them over and start wrapping around. There we go. So we've got that part wrapped, and at this point, just because I feel like it gives it a little bit more security, I'm actually not going to cut these wires just yet. That way, if this starts to loosen up while we're doing things, you have something to grab on and retighten that binding. Alright, now for the fun part. Go ahead and pull out your stone and put it in there in the orientation you want it to have. This is where we actually crimp in the layers of wire to form the cage. Alright, so I'm going to start on the back here, the flat portion. What you want to do, and you don't even have to have the stone in there for this part, what you want to do is eyeball this and find the exact middle portion between your 2 bindings. So right about there. And you're just going to grip one layer of wire, just the very top one here, or rather the bottom one. So just one. And if you need to separate them out with a nail, you can do that. And then you're going to place the tip of your wires at that middle portion that we found earlier. And you're just going to bend that one wire in. Okay? It's not going to look good at first, that's fine. You can flip it over, go the other way. And depending on the thickness of your wire, you're not going to be able to get a super sharp point to it. That's okay, it's still quite pretty, just with a little ripple. You can make it look a little bit tighter just by where you place your pliers to bend this thing. So just like that. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. So after you've done the same thing on that side, we have these two upper sections, which you're going to do the same way. The only difference is that you want to periodically check this binding, make sure everything is staying secure and even as you make this bend. So at this point, after you've got all four of your back bends put in, if you want to antique your piece, this is a good point to go ahead and add a patina to the wires. So I do have a tutorial on that, which you can view by clicking this link here. But we will press on ahead, and that's just why my piece is going to suddenly turn dark, just fair warning for you.